Today, I have the great honor of introducing you to Andy Beck, MD PhD, who's Chief Executive Officer and co founder at PathAI. And he'll speak to us about AI powered diagnostics. You are very welcome, Andy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. And Andy, you are CEO of a very successful startup called PathAI. But maybe before we get into that, could you tell our audience a little bit about your career to date, please?
Sure. I did my training in pathology, and I was always fascinated by the way pathology is really at the interface of science and medicine. So the world of pathology is tissues removed from a patient, sent to the pathology lab, and the pathologist is responsible for analyzing that tissue and making the diagnosis. And one of the most interesting parts of the way many diagnoses are made is the examination of microscopic images. So the ability to sort of just study images and decode images and turn that into diagnoses to then guide therapy was always what interested me most as a student. And I really sort of continued that throughout my career with kind of the added color of not just wanting to use, the training of creating this huge atlas of images in your mind and memory of it, but to see how we could augment human intelligence with artificial intelligence to assess the hypothesis that a pathologist supported by an AI system will be more accurate, more reproducible, more efficient than a pathologist operating alone. And because of that, I did a PhD in machine learning because it was a topic I really didn't know a lot about after my pathology training. And then after that, for about 5 years, I had an academic role doing research in this area. And then in 2016, started PathAI, which is really a company focused on trying to improve patient outcomes with AI-powered pathology.
And that's where I want to go next. So, PathAI, give us the elevator pitch. How does the technology work and how is it transforming pathology?
Great. Well, yeah, I feel like I gave a bit of a preview here, but I think the key insight for understanding pathology is a lot of the work is still very, very manual. So it's experts being trained by previous generations of experts to analyze many, many of these complex images to try to come up with the right diagnosis for each image. So this works very well for many, many cases, but for a significant percentage of cases, there's disagreement between pathologists, disagreement among pathologists, and it's very difficult for humans, based on our visual capabilities, to derive novel predictors of who's going to respond to which treatment from the set of images one is looking at. And as the treatment landscape continues to evolve, it becomes more and more important to get as much data out of these images as we can. So the general way PathAI works in our technologies, we've trained these machine learning models off of, at this point, tens of millions of expert annotated examples of images. And machine learning over the past decade has gotten really good at learning from examples and then understanding patterns and then being able to predict those patterns on unseen images. So our general workflows are, for research, we do a lot of fully automated work where the input to the system is just images and the output is computer-derived features. But for all of our clinical applications, we really see the AI systems as augmenting pathologists. So we built a platform that a pathologist can use. So instead of just looking at a microscope to diagnose images, they can look at a monitor on a computer screen, and in certain cases be supported by digital in all cases and AI in certain cases where we've trained models.
Wow, that just sounds incredible. And congratulations. And I'm sure there'll be many, many questions from our audience around that. But I suppose last one for me is another congratulations. Recently, PathAI Diagnostic Lab Services were sold to Quest Diagnostics. What was that moment like for you and the team? And I suppose what drove the decision to make that move?
Yeah, so we started out in 2016 as kind of a purely software company. So we had a lot of people building the software platform to serve other laboratories. And for about the first 5 years of the company, our major set of partners we worked with were folks in drug development. But really, a huge opportunity for impacting patients in a positive way is to make our platform available in diagnostic laboratories. So back in 2021, we really took the landscape of labs, particularly in the US where we're based, And we found that something like more than 95% of them were not yet using digital. They were just using microscopes and glass slides. So for our technology to really work and impact care, the first step is labs have to go from using a microscope to using a digital pathology scanner and a monitor. So at that point, we just didn't see enough partners to get really active quickly in the diagnostic market by partnering with labs. So we purchased our own laboratory back in 2021. And then for the next 3 years, we built a platform and a set of products really to support pathologists operating in the diagnostic lab. But ultimately, we saw the large vision for the company, and our strategy and how we're going to scale around the world is not going to be by operating many, many labs, because there are already many companies who are really great at that. But it's going to be by supporting labs around the world with our technology platform. So we had the great opportunity last year to do this big partnership with Quest Diagnostics, the largest pathology lab in the United States, that involved both selling our own laboratory to Quest, but also bringing on Quest as our first major partner, diagnostic lab partner, who made a commitment to going digital and over time increasingly using AI to support their pathology practice.
Fantastic. Congratulations. And we've a couple of questions coming in. And one question for you from our audience is, what are the key diseases PathAI's powered digital pathology tools help to detect? And what impact do they have on diagnostic accuracy?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So we work on and try to work on every single area where these pathology slides play an important role. So the types of diseases that we don't work on, just because tissue biopsies and slides aren't playing a critical role, include psychiatric disease, neurologic disease, cardiovascular disease for the most part, because we're not taking brain biopsies or heart biopsies. But everything else where we're taking biopsies, we work in those areas. So that includes skin biopsies are very common, both for inflammatory diseases as well as for types of things that could turn into cancer or cancer like melanoma. Uh, and we work on almost every solid tumor. So most common tissue specimens include skin, breast, lung, prostate, colon. And then the big disease areas that we work on include oncology, so cancer, both early stages as well as more advanced stages of cancer, inflammatory bowel disease, so any kind of biopsy that comes from the GI tract, from the mouth to the esophagus to the stomach to the colon to the rectum. As well as liver disease is a major area of focus, particularly what's called MASH, or metabolic associated steatohepatitis, which is a very common liver disorder that's increasing in prevalence, where pathology plays a really important role. So wherever histopathology is important, really, if it's not just blood, but a tissue biopsy is required, we have a system that supports diagnoses in those areas. And in many cases, we have AI algorithms to also support those diagnoses.
Okay, and how, like, so what impact are they having? Like, so for example, if a company or if a hospital had your technology, didn't have your technology, what impact would that have?
Yeah, it's a good question. So first, there's the whole area of research where we have big impact by just being able to measure hundreds of quantitative features out of the image that you simply can't extract by eye. So with AI, we can analyze hundreds of thousands of cells per image, and then we can use that to find new features predictive of drug response. So that's a major part of what we work on, which is sort of a capability that machine learning has that just manual review doesn't have. In terms of the question on the diagnostic side, first, so about 90% or so of pathology is still done on microscope. So by using our platform for viewing images and collaborating on images, we bring a whole set of capabilities to a pathology lab that they wouldn't have before, which includes being able to have one laboratory that creates the glass slides. They're digitized, and then they can be shared to pathologists literally around the world. So it's a huge advance for collaboration, getting multiple views, efficient ordering of cases, signing out cases more quickly because you're doing them digitally. So a lot of labs first go digital just for all of these workflow and efficiency and collaboration improvements. So we've built a platform that we think is industry leading for that. And then for the specific AI applications, it really depends on the area. So in certain areas, we've shown that we can be significantly more accurate. Like I mentioned, liver disease. Liver disease is one where we can, for example, without using AI, the level of discordance between three pathologists, they all disagree something like a third of the time. Whereas using one pathologist supported by our AI system, the one pathologist agreed with the AI system about 98% of the time. So it made these assessments much, much more reproducible. In other areas, we've shown, like in immuno-oncology in the research setting, that we've been able to increase the identification of patients who would respond to therapy by something like 20%. So in these different applications, we do see significant improvements in all cases, I'd say, in reproducibility, and in certain cases also in accuracy.
Okay, so just much more effective decision making. Okay, loads of questions coming in for you, Andy. So, I'll just start with this one. Are there diseases where this technology may become particularly useful for diagnostic accuracy, like rare diseases or subcategories of cancer? Do you have a case where it added extra information to the pathologist's initial diagnosis?
Yeah, so I would say definitely all of the above. I think one thing that's really exciting about this technology, unlike many diagnostic things that are very specific, we start out very broad. So our digital pathology viewer and collaboration tools add value to every single type of slide because it can be digitized and viewed regardless of the diagnosis. Um, and in terms of specific areas, there are many, but I think one that I'm quite excited about that we're still doing research on is the ability to go from just an H&E image, which is the standard image, and to predict certain alterations that you would have no way of seeing by eye. So we just published a study showing that we can predict a relatively rare type of aberrant protein expression just from the sort of H&E image, and that if a patient is likely to have that, they would benefit from a very specific test that they would not otherwise get. So we see a future where patients around the world are sort of being screened by this AI system, and it would say, oh, this patient's actually very likely to have a rare change. They would benefit from confirmatory testing and then maybe a treatment that actually cure their specific subtype of disease. So the question mentioned oncology, and I think oncology is absolutely the area where that's most advanced, but I would imagine over the coming decade or so, we'll see more precision medicine approaches in other diseases, including inflammatory bowel disease and liver disease.
Okay, you're getting lots of questions and also lots of well done, and thank you very much for your discussion today. This is from Sarah. She's very curious to hear more from Andy about the need to ensure fair and ethical AI, such as bias mitigation and risk assessment, which is particularly important when you're seeking to serve a huge variety of patient populations.
Yeah, it's a super important question. I'd say a couple important strategies for it. One is in product development to have a very diverse set of samples and samples from a diverse population base to train the system on. Potentially, even more importantly, validating on a diverse population that you want the system to generalize to is really, really important. So we ensure we do that in terms of product development. I think even more important or equally important is just going to be the distribution of these technologies in an equitable way across the world, because the big sort of upfront investment that's required are these whole slide imaging, these scanners, because the glass is already being created and it is an added cost to buy the digitization systems. But once that's in place, you can really then democratize at low cost the expertise of the AI systems, because it's much, much cheaper to deploy an expert AI system on 1,000 slides in parallel around the world than it would be to get a set of experts to review 1,000 slides from around the world. So I do think the equitable distribution of this infrastructure is probably the biggest challenge in the field. But once that's in place, I think this really can be a force for democratizing expertise.
And then a question around who should take the responsibility, the AI or the human, in for the decision making, basically.
Yeah, it's a very great
The
question.
gray area. Yeah.
So I think there's a couple parts to it. I think manufacturers such as us should take responsibility for validating their tools, for working with regulators where required to market those tools um, effectively and in a very transparent way to ensure that these are safe and effective tools being manufactured by experts. And then in terms of, there will definitely be some responsibility of the physicians using them to use them correctly, to practice standard of care, to ensure that the systems are being deployed in the way that they've been validated. So there's responsibility on both sides, and you need that. It can't just be all one or the other.
And we've a lot of questions and we're kind of running out of time, Andy, but I'm going to try and get through one or two more. And it's related to what you were saying. It's around the challenge of establishing a standard of AI literacy for the clinicians and the patients who are benefiting, but the clinicians using your tools, and around that, but the literacy, but also the training. What I'm thinking about is pathology training in residency. What are you looking at? Anything around that, your company?
We are, yeah. So I think residency is a really key spot to get involved. I think the younger generation, I mean, I think current pathologists as well as the younger generation are both well equipped to adopt the new technology. And we put a ton of the responsibility on the device manufacturers to make it very intuitive, to make the user experience very smooth. And I think for other products with sophisticated AI under the hood, we've seen how effective that can be. How ChatGPT went viral among everyone within a month because it was just the product worked quite well and was a very simple interface, despite the fact that it's the most sophisticated machine learning under the hood. All of that complexity was in a way hidden from the user. So I think there's the user experience piece. And then I think the other part of the question that's important is just knowing how to evaluate which tools can be trusted and which can't. And I think that's an important area for both physicians as well as for regulators and the manufacturers
And just human, to steal a
and
word from
patients.
Michael. Yeah, just people.
Yeah.
Yeah, we think we need to trust. Okay, last really quick question. What's next? Looking ahead, what's next for AI powered pathology, and what innovations should we be watching out for?
Yeah. So I think what's next is, digital is still early, surprisingly, within pathology. So if you were to visit your local pathology lab, I would guess it's very likely to still be using glass slides and microscopes. And if you want to get a second opinion, you have to put those glass slides, package them up in a package, physically send that package, say around the world. That might take a week. If you want to send it to two different experts, you'd have to send it to one package there, and then the package comes back and you send it back. So I think the first big transformation will be digital taking over and patients expecting that they will have control of their pathology images, which is perhaps the most important part of their diagnostic data, and be able to share it with whomever they want and to really control it in the same way you control your most valuable photos of personal photos. And then I think we'll just see AI increasingly improving the performance of pathologists. I think we'll look back on a time when everyone was just looking at these images with no assistance as a much more primitive form of diagnosis, where we're making quantitative estimates with no support of machine learning. I think that will seem very surprising in 5 years' time because the technology is already there. So I think it's not one of these areas where we need huge technical breakthroughs. A lot of it is we still need product improvements, and then just really making the technology usable and having a good way for it getting paid for so that it can get widely distributed.
Incredible. Andy, it was such a pleasure speaking with you. Unfortunately, we are completely out of time. So sincere apologies to all of you whose questions I did not get to today. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to Andy for the most fascinating discussion today. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you so much. And thanks for everybody for joining in. Please do check us out on Spotify or also on our website for our list of upcoming speakers. And we'll see you all very soon on our next HIT series. Thank you so much, Andy. Such wonderful chatting to you. Take care.